There are streets in Salford where the past clings to the very stones, where the soot from the forgotten factories darkens the walls, and the cobblestones seem to remember every footstep they've ever borne. In the early 20th century, Salford was a city of smog and sorrow, a labyrinth of narrow alleyways, squat brick houses, and river mist that seemed to seep into every pore. It was a hard life, a grey life, and yet amidst the grinding machinery and endless smoke, some souls found strange ways to seek hope, and stranger ways still to court despair. Back then life was simple and hard. You worked, you scraped by, and you kept your head down. The mills thundered day and night, and the sky always seemed to hang low with smoke and rain. Families packed into narrow terraces, damp walls, tin baths, and coats for blankets. There wasn't much folk could do back then. You just got through it, with humour and habit, and hope that tomorrow might feel a little lighter than today. Still, grief had its own way of lingering. Empty chairs at tea time. Letters in the drawer that no one dared to throw away. People didn't talk much, but they felt it. And sometimes, when the nights were quiet enough, they looked for answers wherever they could. Some went to church, and some looked down the bowl, and others quietly began to wonder if the dead were really as far away as they seemed. Which brings us here, to a narrow little lock-up shop on Whit Lane, where the windows always fogged, and the stairs always creaked, like they remembered every step. Above it lived Sarah Ann Sykes, a woman as much a part of the street as the smoke itself. She was the wife of an ice cream vendor, a man who spent long days shouting his wares through the crowded streets. Sarah, meanwhile, had a different calling. Behind the faded lace curtains and warm parlour furniture, Sarah conducted séances. They were simple affairs. A handful of neighbours gathered round the table, fingers trembling, whispering for the spirits to come forth. Candles guttered, shadows stretched, calling to the dark spaces of the room. Some say she could summon the dead. Others said she summoned something else. People of Salford were divided. To some, Sarah was a beacon, a comfort to those grieving sons lost in the trenches of France. But to others, she was a meddler, a woman playing with forces better left alone. And so the shop above Whit Lane became a place of whispered warnings, of curious glances, and some said, growing darkness. In 1920, stepped Patrick Power, a man whose very soul seemed to be worn to the bone. He was a soldier, returned from the horrors of war. 23 years he'd served. His body bore the marks of survival, but his mind bore deeper scars. There was something in Patrick's eyes, a neighbour once said, 1,000-yard stare, a tightness to his mouth, as though he was holding back some silent scream. At first Patrick was just another lodger in the house. He was silent, polite, moving through the narrow hallways like a man half remembered by life. He took his meals quietly, nodded thanks without speaking, before folding himself into his bedroom. In the evenings, when the curtains were drawn against the wet darkness, and the candles guttered in the stale air, Patrick would sit at Sarah's seance table, fingers clamped white to the warm wood, his gaze locked in on the wavering shadows cast by the flames. It was there, in the flickering half-light, that the first cracks began to show. But as the days passed, neighbours noticed a change creeping into it, like rot through a damp storm. His steps grew heavier, dragging across the floorboards. Once muttered murmurs grew louder and angrier, back and forth, like a trapped soul. Some said they heard him arguing with unseen figures. Whatever Sarah had called forth during the séances, it had not retreated quietly into the night. Sarah, once warm, welcoming, began to pull away. The bright candle-lit gatherings grew fewer. The laughter that sometimes rose in those rooms grew rarer still. She passed Patrick on the corridors, with quick glances and tighter lips, offering few smiles and few words, as though sensing a storm gathering behind his darkening eyes. And still, the air grew heavier inside the house. Some whispered that Patrick had fallen under a spell, that in a desperate reach across the veil, Sarah had opened doors that couldn't easily be closed. For days after the final séance, the house remained outwardly quiet. Life trundled on, grim and grey, but something inside Patrick's mind had shifted. On a bleak Saturday, under the low oppressive sky, heavy with rain, Sarah Sykes was seen alive for the final time. Bundled in a shawl, she moved from stall to stall at the market, exchanging weary smiles, clutching on a basket of knotted hands. There was a dullness in her eyes now, a slowness in her step, as if she carried a burden unseen by any other. And that afternoon, with Mr. Sykes away working, the house on Whit Lane stood almost silent, save for the muffled creaks of the old stairs and the slow, relentless footsteps of a man unravelling. Sarah and Patrick were alone, two souls sharing the house already thick with ghosts. No one heard the first blow, and no one heard the second. Just a dull, wet thud when hammer met bone. Then another and another, each strike landing heavier than the last, not just in sound, but in the air itself, as if the room was holding its breath, absorbing the violence. The only thing that moved was the curtain, just slightly, shifting in a breeze that came from nowhere. There were no screams to pierce the choking mist of the Pendleton streets, no cries for help, just silence. Hours later, the heavy door of Pendleton police station swung wide open. Patrick Power stood there, his clothes sodden with rain, his boots caked in mud and blood. He raised his trembling hands, looked at the sergeant with hollow eyes, and then he whispered, "I've killed her." The scene at Whit Lane was a horror few would forget. Sarah lay crumpled in the living room, her body broken and twisted, her head shattered under the cruel weight of her hammer's fury. Blood had pooled and soaked into the cracked wooden boards. The hammer lay abandoned by her side. There was no signs of struggle, no toppled chairs, no frantic claw marks on the wall, as though Sarah had seen her end coming days before it arrived. She simply closed her eyes and let it all fall. The trial was swift, a grim formality before the inevitable. Patrick Power stood in the dock, like a man already dead, his body bowed under invisible chains, his words few, his eyes lost somewhere far beyond the grey walls of the court. Some say he seemed relieved, as if the thing that had taken over him had finally loosened its grip, leaving only the wreck behind. Before his execution, he pinned a letter, a simple, heartbreaking note to a sweetheart who had clung to him during his long descent. Put it down to bad luck, he wrote. Forgive me, but the things that are summoned from beyond the veil, they do not forgive, and they do not forget. At dawn, in the chill grey stillness of Manchester's awakening streets, the hangman did his grim work. Patrick's body swung once, and fell still. And whatever had once whispered to him in the candlelight of Whit Lane was left to slither back into the mist, waiting for the next voice to brave, or foolish enough to call it forth. Today Whit Lane is changed beyond recognition. The lock-up shop is long gone, the stones scattered, its memories swallowed by time. The street hums with new lives, new voices, but the past clings stubbornly to the cracks. Was Patrick merely a broken man, shattered by the long years of war? His mind undone by the horrors too great to name? Or did Sarah, in a desperate reaching beyond the veil, unwittingly summon something darker, something that slipped its way into Paddy's soul, filling the cracks left behind by the grief and violence? Was it madness or possession? A tortured mind or a haunted one? But somewhere in the thin spaces between what we know and what we fear, something still stirs, watching, waiting, and perhaps one day it will find its voice again.
Right, so what do you think of that one then? Now that's a story that has literally been swallowed up almost by the chapters of time, and it's been forgotten about. It's a forgotten murder in Salford that took place, and it's one that resonates with me in a way because it's from the same area that I grew up, so I was instantly sort of drawn to the story. But I've had it sat on my computer for about 5 months, and I've not known whether to go out and film it or to actually tell it in a story format like today. So I hope I've done it a bit of justice. But it just baffles me now, like, you know, the house where this all happened and took place, the scene of the crime, is long gone. And there's houses now built on top of that. And it's scary to think that, you know, it could be the house that you lived in. Underneath the foundations are layers and layers of memories and remnants of the past, that things took place before we were even on this earth. And it'd be scary to think, you know, that that could have happened in your house. Yeah, very, very strange to think. But like with all these kinds of stories that have a supernatural element to them, or some sort of haunting or spirit attachment, you know, it's down to what you believe in. Some people don't believe in it and are skeptical, where others do. So I'm not going to have an opinion on this video. I basically want you to tell me, you know, there is no right or wrong answer, but I'd just like to know in the comments what you think happened. You know, was it sort of, was Paddy's mind sort of haunted by the horrors of war, which sort of sent him over the edge? And you know, or was it something darker than that? Did something really go on in that house that sort of attached to Paddy's soul in a way and made him commit the crime that he did? So, you know, I'd like you to tell me basically what you think. Right, so I am going to wrap the video up now. And now I know the last couple videos have only been short, like 15-minute videos, but I am limited to how much information there is out there and what I can actually do with these stories, because it would be a shame if they were just forgotten about. So they're not really long enough to go out and film and do a full video on for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, but they are short enough to revive and tell the story. And you know, the main thing is that I hope you've enjoyed it. You know, if you've enjoyed it, then it was worth it. So I just want to say thank you once again. If you are watching this for the first time, you know, it would be much appreciated if you could head over to the channel. I'll leave the, well, obviously you'll see the video, so you'll know where to find me. But it'd mean the world if you subscribe to the channel. It don't cost a penny, but it literally just helps the channel grow, and we can, you know, revive more stories like this, and it keeps me motivated to get out and do it. So from the bottom of my heart, thanks so much for watching the video, and until next time, I'll see you all soon. Take care, everyone. Cheers.